What is up, you guys? Diggerdan here, coming at you with another video. Today, I'm reviewing Dune, written by Frank Herbert. So without further ado, let's dig into it. So I'm going to preface this by saying my journey with Dune is as follows. I watched the first movie when it first came out back in, I think, in 2020 or 2021. I actually watched it on HBO Max, so I wasn't even in the theater. I watched it from the comfort of my own living room, and I was enthralled. And the reason I watched the movie first instead of reading the book, because at that point I wasn't really back into reading. I was kind of thinking about reading, but I knew Dune was like this big, huge book, big, huge sci-fi, and I was kind of intimidated by it. So I didn't think I would actually ever read the book. That's why I felt comfortable. I'll just watch the movie and see what happens. I watched the movie, and I loved it. And I immediately put Dune on my wish list for books to get. And then I got it that Christmas, and then it's been on my shelf ever since. I got the first three. It was like the first three box set. So it was Dune, Dune Messiah, and I think Children of Dune. I think those are the first three. And then I know the part two, or the second movie, is coming out very soon, in March. And I watched Tudor Ramble's video saying why you should read Dune a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, you know what? I just need to read it. Like, I've been back in the swing of reading. I just finished Wheel of Time a few weeks ago. So, like Jimmy Nuts from the Fantasy Network, he said, and I agree with him, that if you can read Wheel of Time, you are kind of immune to long books or long series. And I kind of have to agree. So I felt really comfortable going into Dune. Especially after reading some other kind of high-end sci-fi recently, like Hyperion, and falling in love with it. Yeah, that's why all that is to say I finally read Dune, guys, and I love it. I love this book, and I'm really excited to continue reading in the world of Dune and see else what Frank Herbert's mind has come up with. So with that being said, you're probably asking yourself, Daniel, why do you love Dune? Well, the world of Arrakis itself is so fascinating to me. Like, when I was first reading it, or I guess even when I first watched the movie, I was just thinking, this is just Tatooine. This is just a desert planet. And I know that's kind of sacrilegious to say because I know this came out before Star Wars, and I know George Lucas said he had heavy inspiration from Dune. So really, you could say Tatooine's really Arrakis. Whatever. It's just big planet with no water, basically. And this book just explores so much with kind of like the ecology and like how a society would be formed around a planet with very little water, and when water is so precious. There's just so many good things. I just love it. I'm trying not to like say specific things because if you haven't watched the movie or if you haven't read the book, I don't want to spoil anything for you. So I'm trying to be as vague as possible. Yeah, but the world building is phenomenal, top notch. Honestly, I think I can only compare it, I would say the only better world building I've seen is probably Wheel of Time, and that's probably because I'm biased. But as for like a first book, for an individual book, I think this is the best world building I've read up to this point. Now keep in mind, for all you bookheads, bookworms, if you look at my Goodreads, I've only got like 70 some books I've read to this point. Now, I have read more growing up, whatever, but like in recent reading, last couple of years, there's only been 70 some books. So take that with a grain of salt. But Dune just does something so different and like does it so clearly and like makes sense and kind of makes you feel smarter. Frank Herbert does an amazing job, and I don't know how he does it. Especially when there were passages when it's like I knew I wasn't getting it completely. And I'm sure on a reread I would get even more. So I'm sure my world building score could even go higher, potentially on reread. I'm not sure. We'll see in a couple years, or maybe after I finish the series, whatever. But I don't know. It's just so good. In like what the path that Paul Atreides took is different than I was thinking it was going to happen. Especially after like the way that the first movie ends. It's basically more or less kind of halfway through the book, which kind of makes sense. Because I believe they just took this book and split it into two films. And so by the time I got to the halfway point, I really had no idea what was going to happen, because obviously I haven't watched the new movie yet. There's just so many good things. And I highly recommend to read Dune. Like, it's really, like, I know it's a chonker. It's about 850 pages. It's like 80 if you count the glossary and the afterword and all that stuff. But just the story itself is a little less than 850 pages. And so I know obviously that's a big book, but it's like the margins aren't that bad, really. Like, again, just using Wheel of Time as an example, like the paper's really thick. Like Wheel of Time, at least in my versions I have, the mass market Amazon version, like it's like Bible paper, like very, very thin. This is not. This is probably twice as thick. And it, like, it was kind of jarring when I was like doing it for the first 50 pages or so. And so it's like the word count, it is pretty high. I think it's, let me see, I had this somewhere. I think it's like 180 some thousand words. I think in the afterword, it says it's like 212,000. So it's somewhere around there. That's a lot of words, but every word is worth reading, in my opinion. I knocked this out in about a week. I really impressed myself. I ripped through this quicker than I thought I was going to. I think it was 8 days, so I think I averaged about just over 100 pages a day. So, but like that's how much I love this. Yeah, just go read Dune. So that's all I'm gonna say before I start talking about spoilers. I guess the last thing I'll say before spoilers is my overall score out of the 10 is a 9.04. So for me, that is very high. A lot of my stuff follows a little lower than that typically. But yeah, for me, that is very high. And I really can't praise this book enough. So if you haven't read Dune, haven't watched the film, whatever, I recommend going and reading the book, then watch the first film. And then probably by the time that happens, second film will probably be out. So go watch that and then come back and watch this video. And then you can tell me in the comments how wrong I am with my opinions, or right, or how I pronounce things, or is funny, or whatever. Just come back and watch me. I appreciate you. But for everyone else who has read the book, let's keep digging into spoilers. So for my reviews, I have 5 categories I rate, and then I take an average of those 5 categories, and that's how I get the 9.04. Very specific, I know. Whatever. It works for me. I actually stole it from Two to Ramble, so shout out to Austin and Richard. You guys are awesome. I don't even know if you guys know that I steal that, but whatever. So the first category I rate is emotional impact, and I rated emotional impact for Dune at a 9.2. And there's a couple of reasons it's so high. The biggest is just kind of the political intrigue. Sometimes politics, like real life politics, bore me, kind of depress me. But like fantasy or sci-fi politics, because I would say this is kind of like a sci-fantasy, are really interesting, or they can be really interesting, like they are in Dune. Sometimes they can be rather boring and make you just want to go to sleep and take a solid nap. In Dune, Frank Herbert does a really good job of making it intriguing and engaging, and really makes you invested in the characters and in the families and the clans and what have you. And it's just so good. Like some of the high point moments I've had was towards the end of the book when Paul finally gets to, or rides a worm or a maker for the first time, like just like on his own accord, not with him being the driver, or I forget exactly what it's called. And then in the Fremen's eyes, he's officially a man. And that for me was just a really high moment. And then a little bit later at the climax, when his son is killed and then his sister is captured, that was a very low moment. And like, oh, that was a gut wrenching. Like I can't imagine having, because I think his kid's only like 2 or 3 at the old. I think 1 or 2. I don't think he's quite 3 years old yet. So just having like that, like literally toddler or just past infancy, and then the enemy, the family that you hate, the Harkonnens, go and kill your son. Like that is just gut wrenching. Another crazy high emotional impact moment was when he found out, or at least as a reader, you discover that Paul Atreides is also a Harkonnen, because his mom Jessica is a bastard child of Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. Like just all these things, like it just kind of goes back to the politicking. Like actually care. Like, holy crap! Like, he is an Atreides man. He is Leto's son to a T. Um, I don't know. It's just it's just so good. I know I'm not going to do it justice, um, but I'm struggling here. I'm trying to. But yeah, so very very high emotional moments. And there were a lot of moments actually, like when it followed Vladimir Harkonnen, or Baron Harkonnen, whatever you want to call him. That kind of really disgusted me. Like, I know he's like literally this massive, grotesque human being. So like just his presence in his own way kind of disgusts me as a reader. But there was like, I forget exactly what was happening, but there was at the end of the chapter, like one of the last lines or last couple lines was him talking about how he's gonna go have his fun with a little boy, and I'm like, oh my god, that's disgusting. And then in the last line, he's like, yeah, it's the one that looks like Paul Atreides. I'm like, oh my god, that is disgusting. And then he's like obsessed with Paul, like these things. It's just weird. And then I can't remember exactly if that's before or after you find out that Paul is technically Baron Harkonnen's grandchild. But it's just so messed up. Like, the Harkonnens are just so messed up. Like, they're so easy to hate, and I know sometimes people don't like that, but I like that in this. Like, it makes sense. Like, they're easy to hate, great. Like, Paul in the Atreides are easy to like, great. I like that black and white. I know some people are like, oh, but what about the morally gray? I don't care. In Dune, I don't need that morally gray. I just need that black and white. I need those Harkonnens on the morally unethical side of the spectrum, and then you got the Atreides, who are kind of like the Ned Starks of the world, very honorable, very heroic, very intentional with their actions. I love that. So yeah, I love this book emotionally. Very, very high, 9.2. Characters, that is the second thing I tend to rate. That I rate it as a 9 out of 10. Yeah, a little lower than the emotional impact. Again, I liked a vast majority of the characters. I loved Paul. He was very interesting. I actually like Jessica, his mom. I kind of flip flopped a lot on. She was kind of not a nice person. She's kind of a bitch, I'll say. But at other times, it kind of just showed like that's just her motherly protectiveness side coming out, and mother knows best, right? But then there's times when like Paul put her in her place. I'm like, yeah, Paul, you tell her. But then other times it's like Paul was looking to her for leadership and guidance, and just like motherly advice. I'm like, okay, all right, Jessica, you're okay. You're okay this time. And then again, like any of the Harkonnens, bastards, don't like them. Get away. Stay on that side of the galaxy. Stay off Arrakis. Like the Baron especially, and then like Raven, however you say his name. He, I mean, again, he's meant to be the bad guy. He is a bad guy, but you don't really see too much of him. It's more kind of the Baron just saying, "Oh, Raven's gonna do these awful things to the planet, like to the people of Arrakis," and then you kind of see the fallout of it, but you don't really see Raven do the things or say the things. You kind of see Raven very little. And then Raven's brother, I forget his name, like Faestus or something. I don't know. He's kind of mid. I probably would like him a little more than Raven, but it's probably just because we got to see him a little bit more on the page. And he was interesting. You could almost say he's like the honorable Harkonnen, but he's still got his little tricks up his sleeve, or in his hip, if you will. Like his little poison being on the wrong hand in like his 100th gladiator battle. And then also like when he's doing his duel with Paul at kind of the climax, with the Emperor, like basically the Empire on the line. And then he's got like that special needle, poison needle coming out of his hip. So like he's a little more interesting, but still like I'm mixed on, like I said, Jessica. I wish we saw a little bit more of Paul's father, Leto, however you want to say it, Leto Atreides, the Duke. Again, he's kind of like that Ned Stark, very honorable, very heroic, like always there to do the right thing, character. And he's really interesting. And just like Ned Stark, I wish we got to see more of him, you know? But again, so positive on that. And then some of the side characters, like the troubadour, I forget his name, the one that ends up with the smugglers after the initial fallout. He I liked, but then at the end when he like tries and goes to kill Jessica, I did not like him in that moment. But again, he's doing what he thinks is right. He's doing what he thinks. He's just trying to protect his Duke, right? Or avenge his Duke. And then the other guy, I forget his name, but the one that was like with the Harkonnens for those years, I didn't like him. He kind of was, wishy-washy. Again, he blamed Jessica, and he was trying to kind of undermine things with the Harkonnens. But in the long term, during those years, it seemed like he helped the Harkonnens more than he hurt them. But then at the last minute, he kind of showed his true colors, and it's like, yeah, I'm going to trade this man to death. So again, I was kind of mixed on those two guys. Whatever. Duncan Idaho, he was another decent side character. I wish we got to see more of him. I wish we got to see him survive and kind of like that way Paul can have one of his Atreides men under him, kind of under his entire rule, while being a Fremen, if you will. Because I think that would have been interesting. I think Duncan Idaho died way too early, in my opinion. But again, that's just a good character. Like, you just kind of feel that loss when he died, you know? So that sucks. But again, that's just because Frank Herbert wrote a good character that I enjoyed and wanted to see more of. But yeah, characters overall pretty solid. Or pretty good if it's a 9, right? Next is plot. I rated that as an 8.7. So a little lower. I still really solid plot. I still really liked it. So again, like kind of with the family rivalry between the Atreides and the Harkonnens kind of going at it. But then, of course, the Emperor has to have his 2 cents or whatever, and he's kind of the one that set all the events into action and kind of started the downfall of House Atreides, which led to the death of Leto, and then caused the events of Jessica and Paul being picked up by the Fremen and all that happening. So it's like, it's kind of the catalyst of the entire story, right? But still, just the fact, like, the house politics are really interesting, and I almost wish we got to see more of that, because you see that kind of at the beginning and kind of at the end, when Paul confronts the Emperor and confronts the remaining Harkonnens, but it's kind of lost in between, because in between, that's when Paul gets picked up by the Fremen, and he kind of becomes the Fremen and becomes like the prophet incarnate, right, of the Fremen. Mahad Dabid, I think is how you say it. Like the mouse, Paul the mouse, whatever. So it was still really good, but I think, again, you kind of lose some of that rivalry. It's still kind of burning on the backside during this whole time, but then it's picked up again at the end when Paul finally makes the events happen. So the plot, again, it's not really bad. It's an 8.7. It's still very solid. But I just think I like the emotional impact a little more and the characters a little more. So again, I'm still excited to see what happens in the next book, because I know with the way it ends, it's very open-ended. Like, yes, Paul seems to have secured the throne or secured the empire, but I'm interested to see the fallout of what happens. I'm really interested to see if Arrakis actually can be terraformed into what kind of the Fremen dream is. Another emotional impact moment that I forgot to mention is when it's revealed that the Fremen is gathering all this water, and then when Paul is kind of like first taken in, and like after that first duel, after he first kills that guy, and then the guy's water is distilled down, and then he gets the rings telling him how much water he has, and then it's deposited in this massive reservoir that's like, he hasn't seen that much water since he's been on Arrakis. It's like, oh my god, that's so much water. Like, what are they doing? And that's so cool. Like, that's awesome for them. Like, I'm surprised they have that much water. That just was like another high point moment. Like, oh my god. Like, it was kind of like a mind blow moment where it's like, there's a lot more going on than there seems to be, which made me really excited. So yeah, that's plot. Next is dialogue and prose. This is the lowest thing at an 8.6. Again, there were some sections I just had to read a couple times to really kind of understand it. Because it is honestly a dense book. Like, it is fantasy, it is sci-fi, or sci-fantasy. It's really sci-fi. So there's a lot of like new terms that Frank Herbert just kind of makes up and throws in there for world building. So it makes sense. Like, once I understood them, it made more sense. But just kind of getting into that groove. But again, that's with any new series, it's going to take you a little bit to get into it. And it's just, again, Prose is a little older because it did come out in the 60s, and I want to say it was 65. Yeah, so it was 1965 is when it was first released. So obviously older Prose, but it's still really good. Something that I did have to adjust a little bit was on the same page, but just slightly different paragraphs. So one paragraph can be from like Jessica's point of view, and like you kind of get her thoughts, and then the very next line, like Paul, like a thought starts to occur, and then I don't realize until like the end of that line, or maybe even the next line, that it like goes into Paul's mind, and that's what Paul is thinking now. So there's a little bit of that, like back and forth, that it's like, okay, I gotta stop for a second and realize who's having this thought. So that was maybe why dialogue and prose dips a little bit compared to some of the other things. But again, still really solid. Great storytelling. I was enthralled the entire time. I don't think I could read this book any faster unless I was like off work for the entire week. It's really good storytelling, and I love every page, every word. Just phenomenal. And then the last thing I rate is world building, and this is easily the highest thing I rated at a 9.7. Just so much crunchy awesomeness world building wise in this book. Even from like Paul, from his perspective, being on his home world of, I forget what the name is, but it's basically water planet, right? And then he goes to the complete opposite of the desert planet. So even just kind of that, and then having the focus for a lot, being like, you got to shift your mind to water's precious, water's precious, water's precious. Like, that occurring, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And that is, I know it's plot and kind of character driven, but that is 100% world building as well. Because if you're on this desert planet, you have to realize water is very precious, and even like a drop, even that thimbleful of water that you lose every week from your suit, your still suit, it's very precious. That's part of the reason why that mind blow moment when he was down in that reservoir was so huge, because they have this massive reservoir of water, and just, it's so precious, you know? Because at that point, it's instilled in you as a reader too, just how precious water is on Arrakis. So just mind-blowing stuff. And again, kind of the like the prophecy stuff, the Bene Gesserit kind of magic stuff was kind of really interesting. And then I still didn't kind of understand all of it, so that's why maybe world building isn't even as high as it could be if I understood every single thing. Was kind of the that I didn't realize until the end, kind of the dichotomy or trichotomy even of like the Empire, the guild, and then just the planets or the houses themselves, and like realizing that the guild can kind of see in the future with the spice, and even Paul, like going into that 3-week trance or whatever, when he takes the like a single drop of the spice water, or of the maker water, I forget exactly what it was called, that was basically poison to his body, but then because he's had the training that he has, he can actually see in the future, and it's like he's almost omnipresent or omniscient, or whatever the word is, and that's just kind of a mind blow. And then realizing once Jessica becomes a Reverend Mother, like she has that ability as well. And then there's just so many things, and with like the Fremen society itself trying to transform the landscape of Arrakis, and they know it's not going to happen in their lifetimes. Heck, it's probably not going to happen for their great-grandchildren's lifetimes either. But eventually, it's not going to be complete desert. It's going to happen, take many, many generations. And just kind of that vision being instilled in that society, but then also you and the reader, you believe in it as well. It's just phenomenal. Everything about this book I love. And Makes me very, very excited for the movie. I am curious though, and interested to see if I could go back in time. Obviously, I can't. If I didn't watch that movie originally and I read the book first and then I watched the first film, how, because I really did enjoy the first book or movie. Like I said, it really made me interested in the book. I'd be interested to see if I would have liked the book, if I would have liked the book more or less, because there were a lot of story points that I knew were going to happen. Like I knew Harkonnens were gonna win the day on the early, and like I knew Leto was gonna, or the Duke Leto was gonna die, and I knew like Paul was gonna be thrust into the desert with his mom, and that they were gonna just pray that Fremen were gonna take him up, and that those are like the big story points that I knew were happening. Like I knew spice was precious, I knew that water was precious. Things like that, it's like some very basic story points, but obviously those are big, very big story points. So yeah, I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts. I know I've been yapping about this for a minute. Yeah, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts. Have you guys watched the first movie? Are you excited to watch the second movie now? What's your guys' Dune story? Have you guys watched the movie first and then read the book, or have you read the book years ago? What do you guys think about Dune Messiah, Children of Dune, and the rest? I heard kind of the last couple aren't great, but the first three are phenomenal. I've heard mixed things. So yeah, just let me know in the comments, guys. I would appreciate it. So if you enjoyed this episode, please hit like down below. If you guys want to see more from me, Diggerdan, please hit that subscribe button as well as that bell notification icon so you guys know when I upload each and every single time. And I will catch you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.